And welcome to Let's Live Resiliently. This presentation is a partnership between Let's Talk Wellness and the Change to Chill program. And I'm Stacey Bessinen, and I'm a community wellness coordinator for Alina Health. And today I'm going to lead you into some pretty deep reflection on living resiliently. And so let's start out by just defining that word. What is resilience? What does that really mean? And so the dictionary definition is really the ability to spring back or rebound back to our center, our state of balance when times are stressful or chaotic. So when we're thinking of that in terms of what happens when something stressful happens, or when the world around us is in chaos, or our own kind of feelings and thoughts are feeling a little bit chaotic, what does that mean to kind of spring back or bounce back to a state of balance? What does balance really feel like to you? So we'll kind of get into those things as we move along here. And oftentimes we feel like we should be born with this ability to just be resilient or not resilient. And really, we all have this innate ability to have balance. And also on the flip side is to really nurture what works for us as individuals. And that can be kind of a hard thing to find if we don't have good role models, or if we don't take the time to really reflect on what that balance is, what stresses you out, what feels chaotic around you. What really does it take to get back to that balance point? And so our ultimate goal is to find our own path toward resilience. So as it relates to, what stresses one person out might not stress out another person at all. And what might help us reach that balance state might not help another person. So we're all very different, and being different is okay. And that's a good thing. So that's our ultimate goal, is to find our own path towards that resilience, finding our own path towards really figuring out what helps us, what that means, define that balance for each and every one of us. So some ideas are universal. I could say, okay, here are some things that we know, and I actually will be sharing those things with you that can kind of change some of our pathways in our brain towards being more resilient. If we're really feeling empowered to find your path. And we will be discussing these ideas, and we'll be practicing them, and I'll be sending you out some resources in order for you to kind of start on or continue this path toward resiliency. Okay, so we always start with self-care as it relates to finding that balance. Of course, how will we find that balance if we don't take the time to care for ourselves and figure out what works for us and what doesn't? And even reflecting on this moment, okay, I'm kind of feeling stressed. What do I know really feels like I can get back to kind of feeling relaxed in that moment when I'm feeling stressed? Some people might be able to write down a list, some people might not be. So, and the reason why is because oftentimes we're told that it's selfish to take care of yourself. You should be taking care of everyone else. And we know that self-care is really a radical act. And it's something kind of new. We haven't really talked about this very much in the past years ago. We're starting to do this a lot more because we know, and research shows, and we know that taking care of ourselves first and filling that cup definitely allows us to be more effective to care for others. So you can't serve from an empty vessel. And we've probably all heard about putting on your oxygen mask first when you're flying. So the flight attendant comes out and says, okay, in the event of an emergency, an oxygen mask will fall in front of you. You want to put that oxygen mask on yourself first, because what happens if you don't? If you're like, oh, that's selfish, I have to help everyone around me. And so you go to help somebody else and you pass out, and then they pass out because you didn't take that time to put that oxygen mask on yourself first. So what if you do put that oxygen mask on yourself? Now you have the ability to help out everybody in the plane if you need to. So that's the same as it relates to anything in life. You're more effective to care for others when we take the time and the space to take care of ourselves. And that's really the core to building resiliency and to find your own path, to be more resilient, to get back to that, bounce back to that place of balance when you need to. Okay, so let's kind of think about the question that we can ask ourselves. And so I'm going to give you an example. This is also changing a lot in our medical field. You might go to the doctor and they might ask you a different question. So this is a picture of my mom, and my son is the one that is in the green shirt, and then my sister's son is the one with the red shirt, and these boys are both 13 years old now. But this is a picture of my mom, and before my sister and I had kids, years and years, she would go to the doctor once a year for an annual physical. And the doctor would say, "What's the matter with you?" And she would say, well, I have high blood pressure and I'm not eating well and I'm overweight and I'm smoking and I'm just not feeling well. And the doctor would say, "Okay, well, eat better, exercise more, manage your stress, and here's a smoking cessation pamphlet, and see you in a year." And she would come back the next year and the same conversation. "What's the matter with you?" "I'm not feeling well." And then he would give her the same things over again, year after year after year. And then he changed the question. She came in and said, "What's going on? What matters to you?" And she said, "My daughters are getting married and I know they're going to start having kids and I really want to be there for my grandkids. And I'm so excited." And he said, "Okay, well, eat better, exercise more, manage your stress, and here's a smoking cessation pamphlet." Well, you know what? She went away from that appointment, eating better, exercising more, managing her stress, and she quit smoking cold turkey. So it's pretty amazing how powerful that question, "What matters to you?" is, because she got to the root of what will internally motivate herself, bringing her back to what she cares about the most, looking into the future, and really connecting to her values. And that is a question for all of us under every circumstance that we're in. How does a behavior change or change to get to where you need to be really reflect and connect to your values? So very important. So what I'm going to be doing is sending out a values worksheet for you to kind of reflect on and look into and kind of really get to that top value. Okay, so as it relates to, getting back to that balanced state, oftentimes we hear, "Oh, just take it easy, it's fine, and just relax, and you'll heal from that." And we're often told that, just relax, take it easy, uh, as kind of a pathway to recover from illness and sickness and anything that ails us, as if we know how to practice that skill. And it's not something that we can just know. We know we need to practice mindfulness, and we know we need to practice breathing, and it takes time, and it takes a lot of pathways in our mind to really be strengthened in order to make this a reality for us. And in ancient times, knew that relaxation was a paradox, and it's not that simple. Oh, just go ahead and relax. So what we want to ask right now is the question is really, what is standing in your way to kind of figure out what works for you to find that balance? What is standing in your way? Just kind of reflect on that. Another question could be, what is scaring you? What is scaring you to live your best life, to kind of make those small changes, which over time can make a really big difference? And so we'll kind of go back to those questions in a bit, but what is standing in your way to just relax? And right now, there could be a lot of different things. So let's take a look at the first one. So how does how does this word make you feel? You're looking at it, it's in red, it's in a, you know, it's big and it's out there and it's going on and it's around you and it's within you. How does this word make you feel? Just kind of reflect on that for a moment. What does stress mean to you, and how do you deal with it? And do you deal with it, or do you try to push it aside, or just uh, grasp a hold of something, or um, maybe try to deal with it in an unhealthy way? So kind of think about that and just reflect on that for a moment. Okay, so we're stressed. Things are going on within us and around us. So there will always be stress all the time. We're human. We're human, and stressful events happen all the time. So our stress is never going to go away. So remembering that our empowerment is really in our response to that stress. So something stressful happens, that's a stimulus, and then how we respond to that stress, that is where we're really going to focus on. So between the stimulus or the stressor and our response, there is a space. And in that space is really our power to choose our response. And in that response really lies the growth and freedom of living our best life. And so um, that space is where we need to take a step back. So if you think of it, I remember when I first had, like, my youngest is 11 right now. And when, I had 3 boys that were really young, I always heard, if you feel like you're going to yell or react negatively in front of your boys, step away and count to 10. And I'm sure most of you have heard that. Step away and count to 10. So what is that? What is that? That is taking that space, counting to 10, allowing that space between the stressor or the stimulus and how you're going to respond to it. Even it elongates that space. And remember, in that space is that power. So it's easier to take some time away, so you're not reacting so emotionally and or physically to that stressor, to be able to respond more positively in that growth and freedom. So uh, I know my 2 younger boys are in hockey, and before they start the hockey season, we get the parents get a list of rules, and the number 1 rule is, if you're at a hockey game and something happens, the coaches say, we don't want to hear about it until 24 hours after the game is over. So don't call us. Don't come up to us after the game. We don't want to hear from you. We don't want to hear from you. So in 24 hours, yeah, definitely talk to us about it. And the reason is, we're grown adults, but they know that in the moment we could be all fired up and be mad about something, but then along that 24 hours, that space will calm us down, get us to think about it rationally, allow us to have a better response. And maybe most of the time, probably 99% of the time, we will not even talk to the coach. So allowing yourself that space in so many different situations. And so along with this, we need to remember the positive side of stress. So welcoming the stress and really recognize it's a response to something we really care about. When we're thinking of the stressor, like, oh, when we reflect on it, so here is my response to this stressor. And when we reflect on it, we can say, oh, this stresses me out because whatever it is, this really matters to me. It's maybe part of your value set. It may be part of something that you really care about. So there is a positive motivation between why you are stressed over a certain incident or stimulus that's happening. So ask yourself the question, why does that matter? What is that motivation? Why are you getting stressed about it? So we want to really embrace that stress, because then we can transform fear into courage, isolation into connection, and suffering into meaning. And reflecting on that can help us not only figure out why we get stressed, but also figure out what self-care we need in order to get back to that balanced state. So it all works together. Now, um, so let's kind of back up a little bit, because we know that there's a physical side to stress, and that is an important thing to do, because there are stressors that happen that our body needs to take over in order for survival. So our body's way of prepping us for fight or flight. So if we're walking down the sidewalk and we step out on the street and there's a car coming, we jump back right away, car goes by, and we're okay. We don't have to tell our brain to say, okay, foot, move back so I don't get hit. Our body automatically does that. Of course, we need that part. It's so very important for survival. Um, we need it in times of danger, and that's a really good way to look at it. Like, we can, when that happens, our heart rate increases, our pupils will dilate, we get that cortisol release that helps us do what we need to do to stay safe. So we kind of want to appreciate that part of the physical response of what our body does during stress. And then we also want to learn the way, what we need for our body to calm that physical effects, because sometimes it doesn't feel too good when our heart is pounding. And so, catching yourself and saying, oh man, that was really stressful, and just breathing, taking those deep, deep breaths, because when that stressful time happens, what happens is we start to breathe harder and more shallower to really get more oxygen in, so we can do what we need to do. So when we calm ourselves, then taking those deep breaths in and exhaling fully, and then of course there's the and dot dot dot, because we're all different. So what else do you need? What else do you need during those times of physical stressors, when that cortisol is released and our survival mode has came into play? So I don't know. It could be many, many different things depending on who you are and what you need for self-care as an individual. So we'll talk about some other things as well. So then we really want to look at that emotional side of stress. So something stresses us out, and we have an initial reaction to it, um, or we have that physical stressor with survival, and once that danger is gone, then what? Um, Sometimes we could have a reaction so much so that we end up not being able to forget about that situation. Like, oh my gosh, I could have died. That car almost hit me. I can't sleep now. Like, and we just kind of build that story and on until it really does affect us emotionally, and then it affects how we live our life. And so a good reflection question for you is, how does stress affect you emotionally after a physical stressor happens, after that survival, after maybe watching the news or whatever stressor happens? How does it affect you emotionally after it happens? Are you sad, angry, mad? Can you sleep? Really reflecting on that can help you uh, kind of also tap into those reasons why. So, and then we kind of get back into how to calm that emotional reaction. So reflect on those values and reflect on the question, what scares you? So um, oftentimes we uh, have a really hard time to kind of think of, why am I emotionally reacting to the situation? Sometimes we don't even want to go there, because it could bring up some painful memories. It could bring up some things that we've been pushing away for so long. But oftentimes what happens when we can really reflect and go, oh my goodness, that's why I react that way, is because, in the past this has happened, and I've kind of built these walls around my heart, and I don't want to feel, or I don't want to kind of delve into that. And it can be really, really scary. And so we just kind of, again, put up some more walls, or thicken those walls, so that we don't have to go there and deal with it. And but I can tell you this, that it is worth it. As hard as it is worth it, kind of figuring out how stress affects you emotionally, and why. what values are being affected in you. And so that's why that value work is so very important, because you can link your value to the reasons why you react to the stressors that you do. And so we'll kind of get into that just in a little bit. And so here's a human function curve. We need a certain amount of stress in our life. So as you can see on the performance axis there, as the performance goes up, you can see that, and then as the pressure goes off to the side. So um, if the performance is really low, like for instance, if you're doing a job, um, or let's say a hobby that is hard, um, and you have very low pressure, you're going to feel pretty bored, like a hobby that you might not really like, and that's really easy, and there's no pressure, you're going to be pretty bored. But as the pressure goes up and the performance, like it's a hobby that you really enjoy, and it's a job that you really enjoy, and you have more projects and more things to do, you kind of get into that comfort zone. And then as the performance goes up, you're really doing things that you really enjoy, and then you have more projects coming in and more pressure, you'll find an optimal performance space, and you're really finding your strengths and really living your best life. And so that's optimal place to be, right in that situation. But let's say you feel like you need to do more and more and more, you put pressure on yourself, or others are putting pressure on you, and you're just doing too many things, too much stress, then we can get into more of a strain. And we can feel that in our own body, like I can't add one more thing to my plate, I'm overwhelmed, I just can't do this anymore. So then you can kind of shift back and say, you can say no in this situation. You can be like, no, I want to kind of get back into where I'm really feeling comfortable with what I'm doing and the pressure that comes along with it. And then we go all the way over where the performance, you have so much on your plate, you have a lot of things going on, you can almost burn out to the point where you just can't do anything anymore. You can't even get out of bed. So uh, if we didn't have stress in our life, we wouldn't get out of bed. But if we have too much stress in our life where we're burnt out, then we won't get out of bed. So you can kind of see that we want to kind of stay at that optimal performance, that comfortable, that strength, that strain, kind of in there, and catch ourselves when we're in that comfort, when we're in that strain, and like when we're in that comfort zone. Sometimes that's easy. Like I could stay here forever, but we're not really continuing to advance to kind of a higher state of being. So that's when we kind of make some new goals and really push ourselves to do a little bit more. And then when we get to that kind of that strain, oh, I need to kind of back up a little bit. And so that's kind of what our ultimate goal is, to be in that strength. Like we're really working on our strengths. Okay, so that's a human function curve. And so, like I had talked about, when we get kind of into that strain and that boredom and in that burnout, where that stress isn't serving us all of our strengths, then that stress can actually cause an inflammation reaction in our body. And every single illness that affects us starts with inflammation. And because stress and that cortisol that's released, if we don't have ways to uh, let that cortisol go and resolve that stress, then we'll have more inflammation. So here's some illnesses that are related to stress: colds and flu, cancer, depression, eczema, other skin disorders, post-traumatic stress syndrome. Remember when I had mentioned about um, when a stressor happens and we emotionally react to it, so much so that we can't even sleep, and even though the stressor's long gone, we have that, it can go all the way into post-traumatic stress disorder, stomach ulcers, heart disease, asthma. So all of those tend to be, and many more, like anything that you can think of can be a illness related to stress. So stress is a huge thing. I remember when I was younger, I was having some stomach issues, and I went to the doctor and had all the tests, and all the tests came back fine. And finally, I went to my annual doctor at appointment after all these tests were done, and she said, I don't know what's going on. And I said, you know what? I think I'm stressed. And she goes, you know, you're the first person to ever admit that it could be stress. And I was just stressed, and I wasn't dealing with it, and I didn't think I was stressed. And so sometimes that can be the case where we just kind of start getting used to being stressed, and we start thinking, you know, something else is definitely wrong. And as soon as I started putting in some more stress management tools into my day and figuring it out, the stomach pain went away. So um, that's not, please don't ignore your pains and symptoms that come up. We really want to figure out what's going on, all the while taking care of ourselves to be able to live our best life. And so what can we do? So self-care during stress. The first thing is assessing uh, and reflecting on what what that stressor was. Like, oh my gosh, I am stressed, and being aware of it. So I am stressed. I am stressed because this happened, and I reacted to it because this is my value that that I can relate it to, that maybe the boundary was crossed, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So the resilient work really involves these steps. So values, figuring out what your top value is, your attitude towards that stress. Um, like I mentioned before, having that positive and welcoming attitude towards stress, because we know that we're stressed over something because it's something we really care about. And then how do you resolve stress? So ultimate goal is to really work on that relaxation for our mind and body, and being able to engage the PNS system, or the parasympathetic nervous system, and discharge that energy. Get rid of that cortisol. That cortisol is meant for your body to fight or flight. That can happen if in survival mode, but it can also happen, that cortisol can be released if you're just going about your day and all of a sudden a thought comes into your mind, and that cortisol can get released over a thought. And you know, it's happened to me, and all of a sudden my heart starts pounding, and I'm like, oh man, what just happened? And I'm like, oh, whenever I think about this, I get stressed. And so how can we discharge that energy? And you know, there's many different ways, but and I'll talk about those in just a moment. um, but one of the things that we really want to get into is to really work on building up those pathways in our mind, and mindfulness practice and a relaxation practice. They're all called a practice because it takes time. It takes time for our body to just learn how to get into that relaxation state, just like that. And it doesn't happen overnight. It takes some regular daily mindful practice. And what that will allow us to do will allow us to get some deep rest. It will allow us to maybe stop and quiet those thoughts, or those reactions, and calm our mind, body, and spirit. And it's almost like a reset for the body. And so when something stressful happens and you react to it, physically, mentally, emotionally, you can reset yourself. So what does that mean? The first place we always start is the breath work every single time. So we're going to take a chance, or take some time right now and do some breath work. And it's so very, very powerful, because it's our number one tool, because our breath is with us all the time. So what I want you to do is feet flat on the floor if you can. I want you to take a deep breath. Bring your shoulders up as you inhale, filling your lungs all the way down to the bottom of your belly. And then as you exhale, shoulders come back and down, chin in slightly, and try to maintain a really good posture. And just, you can close your eyes if you'd like, or just stare at maybe the clouds and on your screen, and just breathe. There's nothing more that you need to do. Just breathe. Maybe focus on the temperature of the air as it enters your nose, temperature of the air as it leaves your body. And just think about that breath, that oxygen nurturing your whole body. And then as you exhale, you're exhaling any stress that you may have at this moment, along with all that carbon dioxide, and just breathe. And we know that this works with the relaxation response naturally in our body, the part of our nervous system that needs that deep breath in order to calm itself down. It's called the relaxation response. And so just breathing. Breath work is so very, very important. Oftentimes when we're breathing and we're stressed, we tend to breathe just very shallow. And so when we can take that deep breath in, then we stop hyperventilating. We can kind of calm ourselves and kind of get into back to that balance that we're talking about for resiliency. So go ahead and take one more deep breath in. And as you exhale, wiggle your fingers and your toes, open your eyes if they're closed, and bring yourself back to the room. Good. So let's talk a little bit about that breath, slow, deep breathing. It really activates a vagus nerve, and that runs through the diaphragm. And what that does is it engages your relaxation response, so your parasympathetic nervous system. So it affects your nervous system. What things that make you nervous and stressed, it will elicit that and engage that, and that's the ultimate goal. It increases that oxygenation, gets that oxygen in, and we know that oxygen is so very important for our whole body to be nourished. And then that slow, deep breathing can also interrupt the panic response that we're having. That takes practice, especially when we're hyperventilating. It really helps that grounding part of kind of getting out of our thoughts and into the moment that we have, this one moment. Maybe feeling our feet on the ground, maybe looking at 5 different colors around you. What's a couple of things that you can actually touch, so you're bringing yourself into this present moment during that panic response. And then slow, deep breathing also helps with that belly breathing. Remember, really getting at that diaphragm to work so that you can get more oxygen in and exhale fully. So very, very important to get that air down into your belly. If we watch babies breathe, their belly is rising all the time, and so kind of need to get back to that belly rising when we're breathing. So that's that slow, deep breath. So, okay, so we have the breath down now. Now we want to think about decluttering the brain. What is going on in our brain when we are stressed and when we react to stress? So let's kind of walk through that. Mindfulness is very important, like we've talked about, being aware of what's going on around us and within us, bringing ourselves back into the moment and grounding ourselves to our present moment. And so decluttering the brain and mindfulness, being in this present moment on purpose. Like right now, I'm really, really stressed and I'm reacting negatively. So what I need to do is just be in this one moment. I'm going to purposely bring myself into this one moment that I have, and that's the present. Another one is noticing our thoughts. And a good reflection at that moment is, are your thoughts contributing to your stress right now? And like I mentioned before, sometimes a thought can elicit that stress response, can release that cortisol that causes all that physical stuff in your body, like your heart to race, and maybe you can start sweating or just feeling stress. So noticing those thoughts, so very important. And then steps to living resiliently. Remember, these are the ones we just talked about. So checking in with yourselves. What motivates you? What are your values? What matters to you? What's really important to you in your life? Like that check-in. Oftentimes we don't check in with ourselves. We just kind of go through our daily grind one step after another. And if something comes up in our mind or in stress, we try to push it away, or try to deal with it in maybe a not so healthy way. And how do you view stress? What is your attitude? Like I mentioned before, is stress a negative thing for you, or can we look at it and welcome it and think of it as a positive to relate to what you really care about? Oh yeah, I'm stressed about this because I really care about what's going on. And oftentimes when we can relate that, then we can best take care of ourselves. And then the third one is taking care of yourself. So personal steps that you can take to reduce stress, and really reflect on that, so it can make things easier for you. So what works for you? I don't know. There's uh, many people on this call, and when we're thinking about what works for you, I could definitely list a bunch of things, but I don't know. If we have 20 people on the call, that's 20 different ways that might work for you and might not. So we really want to find out what stresses you out and why. So that awareness, and then what values and boundaries are being crossed, and then that value work. So for instance, if I can say, so I've done my value work and my top value is kindness. Like I really want to be kind to others, and I really want people to be kind to me. It's my top value, and it's really, really important to me. So when I'm looking at this, I know my value, and is there a time where I've allowed people to cross that boundary of that kindness? Maybe somebody wasn't so kind to me, and I didn't stand up for that value. And yes, there are definitely times where people have crossed that value and crossed that strong, loving boundary that I set up for myself. And so when that usually happens, it could be many different reasons. And usually it's, I am worried if I stand up for that boundary that I've set up, I might have a reaction that isn't very positive in that other person. Um, it's really hard to have crucial conversations around it, or I don't want to hurt another person's feelings. And so I think that, oh man, what if I say, you weren't very kind to me, and I don't get the reaction that I'm looking for? Then what? Then how do I react that time? So oftentimes what happens is, um, when our boundary has been crossed and we know our value, we have to work through that too. We have to really find those things and be okay with standing up for ourselves, and creating those strong, loving boundaries, that when somebody does cross our boundaries and our values, that we're okay with any reaction that we get. And knowing that it has nothing to do with you, the way other people react, it has everything to do with them and what's going on within them, how they react to stress, and how they best care for themselves. So if you have strong, loving boundaries, it's okay to stand up for them. So that's why the value work is so very important. And then another thing to really think about of what works for you is, how do you release stress, and how do you best take care of yourself? And is this the healthiest way to do that? So if you stress eat, is that the healthiest way to take care of yourself? If you overexercise, is that the best way to take care of yourself? I mean, exercise is a great way to relieve stress, because that fight or flight, that cortisol that gets released, is meant for you to fight or flight, like run away. So to run away for survival. So if you go for a walk and that cortisol has some place to go, then yes, great. That's a great way. But if you overexercise, that that might not be as healthy for you. And so kind of thinking about how you release stress, and is it the best way? Is it healthy for you? That's another just awareness to make sure you're taking the best care of yourself. And then just remembering to ask the question, like, what helps you? What nourishes you in this moment, or during stress? If you can write down a list of things that, oh, this when I take a bath or a shower, or when I punch a pillow, it really helps, or when I talk to someone, or go for a walk, or the list could be a mile long. But knowing that if you forget, because sometimes we do, we're so stressed that we forget about self-care. But if you have that written down somewhere, you can look back and say, oh yeah, I need to do this, and I know it will help me. It'll nourish me. It'll be right there for you, so that you can go back to it anytime you need to. So resilient work, what we've talked about already. Another quick area I wanted to talk about is kind of that question: what scares you? What scares you in the realm of really figuring out why you're reacting and why you're feeling the way you're feeling? Um, Sometimes going back to emotions can be really, really tough, like I had mentioned. And just remembering that 8 out of every 10 people you meet are dealing with or have had past trauma. And so just knowing that, um, and if you've had past trauma, just knowing that you are very, very more powerful than you actually think you are. As beings, we're so very powerful to heal ourselves, and to get the help that we need in order to heal, and really work and really work on that self-care for ourselves. And just knowing that we're very powerful in the way that we can help others. So by our actions and our words that we say, uh, we oftentimes don't know our influence that we have over other people, and how much that we can really change another person's life, or even change our own life by how we treat ourselves and how we treat our emotions and our feelings. So just remembering that it can be scary to kind of reflect on our emotions and our feelings, and why we're having these emotions and why we're feeling what we're feeling, especially if it goes back to some stressful times in our life. um, and just remembering that if you react poorly, if to a situation, and maybe reacted negatively, maybe we've said some hard things, it's okay to forgive yourself, and to apologize for it, and maybe even say, oh my gosh, I reacted this way because it elicited this memory that I've had, and I've always reacted this way, and I'm really working hard to feel better and get better, and to really heal my reactions and my emotions over this. So I know that's kind of abstract, but it's really powerful work. And if you need help, if you need a therapist or a counselor, it's worth it. I can tell you, it's definitely worth dealing and healing, and reflecting on why you react, the reason why you react the way you do, especially if it's a negative reaction. Um, Very, very powerful. Okay, so resilient work is our value work, which I'm going to send you a worksheet on that. Catch yourself with awareness. Yep. Oh my gosh, I'm stressed. I'm stressed because, okay, what do I need in this moment? You're just catching yourself, and you're just aware, oh, I reacted really negatively. Uh, and and that's okay. Experiment with new ideas. So many different things out there. Just you can even Google ways to relax, and kind of write down a couple more to try this week. You never know when something new might really help. Just keep experimenting. Stay hydrated. We know that dehydration can cause a lot of, or it can actually cause you to be a little bit more stressed, because your body needs um, that hydration. Every single cell needs to be hydrated. Move your body. As I mentioned before, that fight or flight is meant for you to do something. That cortisol is released to do something. So if you feel that cortisol surging, the best thing to do is move your body so that cortisol has somewhere to go. If it doesn't have anywhere to go, it will kind of, you'll fester in the juices of that, and that can cause a lot of inflammation. So getting that cortisol out is so very important. Connecting with other people, talking to someone, if it's a therapist, if it's a friend, if it's a family member you trust, really connecting with people is so very important, because not only can you help out a friend or family member, not only can they help you, but you can also help them. So remember to connect with people. Go outside. Nature is so very, very healing. It's so very powerful. Even if it's really cold outside, going out, um, getting all bundled up and just being outside, getting away from news and radio, and just being in that vitamin N, we call it. So powerful. Eating fresh, real foods. Remembering that, if a medicine that you're taking, like an aspirin that you're taking, gives you some good side effects, like your headache goes away, or maybe your stomach starts burning, so that's a bad adverse reaction of taking an aspirin. It could be. The same thing with food. If you are eating, junk food or food that doesn't have very many nutrients, your body's going to have some adverse reactions. But if we're eating real, fresh foods, but a lot of vitamins and minerals, that will give you some really good side effects and heal your body and mind. Laugh a lot. We know laughter is some of the best medicine that we can have. So especially when we're really, really stressed, what are those things that can help you laugh more? And I always recommend watching YouTube, babies laughing on YouTube, just to kind of elicit that laughter. Pet therapy, we know there's a lot of research that has been done. Spending time with pets, just petting them and being with them is good therapy. Being creative with art and music. We know that creativity, drawing, painting, sculpting, listening to music works on different parts of our brain. And so being creative as much as you can to elicit a different part of our brain is so very, very powerful. I know when I'm right-handed, so when I do anything with my left hand, I have a different attitude about some things. So I try to use my left hand as much as I can, because it does use a different part of my brain. Sleep is medicine. So making sure that you have healthy sleep habits and working through that in order to be able to sleep well. And then don't give up on yourself. Keep trying different things. Remembering relaxation is practice. It takes practice. And then, so this just kind of leads up to some other research that has been done around powerful tips for the brain to build some positive pathways from our lower part of our brain to our higher executive functioning part of our brain. Our lower part is that part of our brain, that our primitive part. That's that survival mode. We need that part of our brain. But we just don't need it to be firing all the time. So we're building pathways up to our higher executive functioning part of our brain that says all is well. And every single time we take a deep breath, we're building up a pathway. So here are some 3 more things I'll give to you before we leave here. Gratitude letter, really thinking about a person who has made a big difference in your life and writing them a letter and sending it off. We know that that can increase happiness scores for up to 2 months. Amazing. 3 good things, writing down 3 good things for 14 days. Maybe right before you go to bed, right, just jotting down. It takes a couple minutes. If we can do that for 14 days straight, every night for 14 days, that can increase our happiness scores up to 6 months. That's huge. And then a random acts of kindness. So if you do something random for somebody else, like maybe pay for the coffee in the drive-through for the person behind you, that can offer you 24 hours of happiness. And then the person or anyone else who sees that around you can also offer them 24 hours of happiness. So very powerful, powerful things. And then we've talked a lot about self-care as well, always very powerful. Okay, so I know we're a little bit over time. I will be staying on for any questions that you may have. And otherwise, thank you so much for joining me. And next week, I will be talking about self-compassion.